Welcome to Assetwolf. In this tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to work with asset types in Assetwolf. To find asset types, go to the super user area like this and click on asset types. This will give you a list of the types of asset that exist already. There's some standard ones that are created when you create your first Assetwolf portal. They're relatively generic. They may or may not have the kind of fields that you want, but that's not a problem because you can create your own. In my example here, I'm going to make one called a toaster. So I just come here and click on create asset type, and I can even give it a model if I've got a specific model in mind. So let's say I've got toaster model A. I can give it a nice image. So here's a nice toaster image I made earlier. It can be SVG, PNG, whatever you like. And then I need to define some fields. Now, there's 4 basic types of fields that you can have on your asset type, and these will all come through when you work with the assets themselves, assets of that type. The first type is metadata, and this is static data that you'll be able to set for a particular asset. It's already got a name, but you might, for example, want to have something like a date installed. So you can give it a name here. So let's call it date installed and date installed. Now the first field is like a code name that you can use in other formulas in Assetwolf, and the second is the label that will be displayed on the screen. And then I'm just going to give that a string so we can put anything that we like in there. Then another field that I want will be whether the toaster is switched on. So I'm going to call that on and call the label switched on. And then for that, I'm going to need some incoming data. So this is going to be a Boolean value. So it's going to be true or false. I can leave it with the words true or false, or I can call it on or off if I prefer. If you click this checkbox here, it'll create a graph for you. So that'll be quite nice to display whether something's switched on or not. Another new field I need is of course going to be a temperature. Let's say our toaster's got 2 toasting bays, so I'm going to call one temp 1, and that's going to be temp of bay 1. This code must now correspond with the data coming in from the toaster asset. So there's got to be a field in the incoming data called temp1 in order to connect up with this here. Assetwolf will give us more assistance in that respect later on when we try to connect a specific toaster. Now let me choose what kind of data that is. That's going to be incoming data floating point. Okay, I can put in a multiplier here. So if I was sending in, for example, an integer value and I wanted to multiply it up or multiply it down, I could do that. It might make it easier to send an integer value and end up with floating point in order to save data transfer. It's up to you, but the multiplier is there. It'll multiply it by that number when the data comes in. I can choose to create graphs again, and I'm going to give it a minimum and maximum. These things are not necessary, but they will make the graphs look nicer because they'll have some nice little dotted lines. So I'm going to say 0 as a minimum and 120 Celsius as a maximum. Let me just click over here, and my Mac is gonna, there we go. I can put in a little degree symbol and see. I'm going to then add another field, which is going to be called temp2, and this is going to be called temp bay2. And again, I'm going to need incoming data, floating point, create graphs, 0, 120 again, and I'm going to just copy that. So we've got degree C again. Then I'm going to show you another field type, which is a calculated field type. So let's assume we want to make something simple, just like the maximum of 2 temperatures. So I'm going to just call it max temp, and here I'm going to call it max temperature as the label. And now I'm going to choose a calculated field. This is going to be floating point again, but calculated. There's also temporary incoming data, but that's a little bit more advanced, so I'll show you that in a separate video. Again, I want to see some graphs, and I now want to do some calculations. So if you look here, I've now got a choice between max, mean, min, range, and sum. In this case, I'm going to do max, and I want the field names of those two fields, and I want to find the maximum of those two. So I'm going to call it temp1 and temp2. Again, I'm going to have min and max, and I'm going to put degrees Celsius in there. One thing here is about thresholds. You can choose to use thresholds, and this can then be used in conjunction with things like alarms. So for example, I could set a threshold of say 100 as an alarm threshold, and I might want a warning threshold at say 80. So that's how I can do that. I can do it in the units that these things are measured, or I can do it in percentage if I prefer. In this case, I'll do it as units of degrees Celsius. Okay, so now I need to save this asset type. Okay, so that's saved, and I've now got in my list Toaster Model A, and it's got its icon and it's got some fields. So I'm now going to go back to my dashboard, and I'm going to create an asset, and I need to send some data. So let's say my toaster. So give it a name or some number, and make sure it's got the right asset type. So it's Toaster Model A, and it just reminds me the fields that are on Toaster Model A. It's put here daily installed because that was the extra metadata field that I added, and I'm going to say that's the 7th of December 2016. And I need to generate a device ID. So if I click the button, it gives me a random device ID. So I'm now going to save that asset, and there it is. It's not been connected before, so the button here is saying connect. So I'll click on connect, and here it's giving me the connection parameters. For this video, I just want to show you this in a simulator because it's the easiest way to demonstrate my point. So click on data simulator like this, and go to the simulator. Right, so now in the simulator, so this is pretending to be our toaster. So I can send some data using this just by entering some numbers here. It's real simple. So let's say to begin with, we have 20 degrees Celsius in each of the bays because it's not switched on, and send that data, okay? And then 20 again, still not switched on. Now let's switch it on, and the bays start to heat up. So this one's going to be say 25, bay 2 is going to be 27, and send. Switched on again, it might have reached 30, this one might have reached 33. A little while later, it might have reached 40, and this one's reached 45. And then a little while later, it's reached 45 here, and this one's reached 48. And again, let's say it reaches 60, and this one hasn't got so hot this time. Let's say it's 57 and sent. And then finally the toast pops out and it starts to cool down again. So it's back down to, let's say, 25 and 26 as it gradually cools off, and then eventually back down to some normal temperature, 20 again after some time. So now let's go back to our asset here. I'm just going to refresh this page, and I can see it has communicated. It hasn't really communicated, but it registers a communication because the simulator has sent some data. So now I want to see what's been going on. I can see here's my fields, max temperature, although that's a calculated field, it can have graphs as well. Switched on, there's some mixed values here because it's been on and off, as we know. Temperature of bay 1, temperature of bay 2. There's 12-hour means here, these graphs. They're very short in this video because these have only been going for a few seconds, of course. And so now I'm going to view a graph. Let me view the max temperature graph. So now you can see, and I'll zoom in on this little period of time here, just highlight that. So here's the max temperature that my toaster has had, and I can compare that with other data. So I can superimpose several things at once, up to 3 fields actually, not all of them. So I want to compare with switched on and temperature of bay 1, update. Now what I can see, again, if I zoom in on that period, I can see when it was switched on, and I can see the temperature was going up and coming down. Let me just do that again. I'm going to turn off that switched on one so I can show you the point of the calculations. And then here you can see, there we go. So this is now, if you look over at this number here, you can see that that is showing me the maximum of the values. So it's recording the incoming data on these, and it's showing me the calculated maximum of those fields over here. This is a real simple example. Obviously yours will be more clever than mine, but I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for watching.